Hello, everybody. This is Miriam Coladonado here. Today, product marketing specialist for networking and security here at Phoenix Contact. Today, we're actually going to be talking about a very popular virus, not COVID, not the Delta, but a very popular computer virus that has been affecting IT and OT systems and disrupting those systems, which is the ransomware malware. To give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be talking today is the next agenda. So we're just going to be talking about a little bit of the ransomware, the looks and the field, and click back, I'm sorry about that. What is a ransomware and the looks and the feel? Because most of the time when you talk about ransomware, everything is doom and gloom. Everything is, I want to put a tinfoil hat on my head and I want to make sure I don't click or touch anything because I could potentially get ransomware. But understanding what ransomware is very important, and the history and the common attack paths and the commonality between all of those viruses will pretty much make you feel a little bit more comfortable understanding what you can or what you should or should not be doing, and move on with a lot of defensive recommendations that you can do. So the first thing is, let's start with the ransomware word. It comes from the two or more known terms. Is terms ransom, which we already know it means held hostage for money. And malware, of course, which is also another composite word for malicious software. That makes the entire word ransomware. Every time you hear or talk about ransomware, this is the feeling that I get from attendees or from the conversation. It feels like all doom and gloom, or like a dark, scary room that you want to get out. Is that fear of an attack that starts creeping in almost to the point of paranoia. And I imagine it, I have small child, so I imagine it like that sense of scared when my kids are scared of the dark, right? The monsters in the dark, because they really don't know what it is. But the session today is not to increase the fear, it's actually to shed some light on that situation, right? To turn on the light and to explain to the mature side of ourselves, hey, there's really no monsters in the dark. And, compared to that analogy, there is, it does exist, ransomware does exist, but as more as you turn on the light and you understand what ransomware is, the commonalities, how does it come in, and what do you need to do to defend your network, you will be a little bit more comfortable walking it through or protecting your networks from those malicious monsters. So what is ransomware, right? What is it? Ransomware is an always evolving kind of malware. It requires the abduction of some type of computer system. So we're thinking about operating system. It doesn't matter if it's Windows or Linux, for example. To pay, so abducting that information from that computer system, and then the malicious factor, the attacker, will require that user to pay some ransom in order to recover the encrypted files, to access the entire files on the computers that are already encrypted. Once it penetrates the computer, this malware is activated and causes the entire system to crash. Now, this is what you don't want to look. This is what it looks like when you get attacked. This is just our, famous ransomware. And if you want to Google it, you can find a couple of these images. But these are some of the screenshots of famous ransomware pop-ups that had happened throughout the years. What does it say? How do you know you're attacked or under a ransomware attack? It's pretty straightforward. The message itself, it will immediately tell you, hey, this is what it looks like, like your network has been infected. Your files, your data it's all encrypted. And in order to get them back, you have to pay X amount of dollars, or most time also known as hackers use Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. Additionally, with that, you also have some type of account out clock, which pretty much lets you know that, hey, you have a due date to pay this limited time offer or to take action to pay us, or else your price might go up or you'll never get your data back. I mean, there is probably hundreds of thousands, if not thousands, of variation of this type of ransomware out there in the wild right now. So these are just screenshots for you to reference a couple of them. Now, let's jump back. Let's jump far back in the history of ransomware. Ransomware has existed for decades. And to be specific, and I put 1989, the first recorded ransomware on paper, that everybody knows about, happened back in 1989 with the use of 20,000 physical floppy disks. This hacker kind of shipped to a lot of 20,000 medical researchers saying that there was some critical information about an AIDS research that he's been doing. And of course, doctors inserted this on their computers, and as soon as you inserted the floppy disk, malware infected the computers. And the message at that time demanded a check, a physical written check, for $189 to be delivered, physically mailed to a PO box that was located in Panama. Obviously, ransomware doesn't come via floppy disk anymore, right? Instead, it gets through the system to the internet, to what we're using right now, because we use it, we need it. Now, let's fast forward to 2017. And 2017, it's a pretty breakthrough year for everybody. Everything, it doesn't matter if you're an IT or an OT, because in 2017 is when the entire world started to notice ransomware. It made big news, starting with WannaCry and then followed by NotPetya. And they were so disruptive within IT and OT systems that it showed that an IT ransomware or dedicated device for ransomware would also affect industrial networks. That's when everybody realized ransomware can affect operating systems. And then lastly, we're going to come back to, this year, what has been going on, and what are these hackers doing all the way up to 2020 and 2021. So if you remember 2020, we were all in COVID year. We were all very interested in knowing more information about COVID, and a lot of ransomware on your personal computer, on even work networks, were targeted because we were looking for more information about COVID and then the vaccine. So there were a lot of phishing schemes that were introducing ransomware to computer networks during 2020 because of this peak of information that we were always. So a lot of people got scammed, got ransomware on the network, clicking on the wrong link, trying to get more information about COVID, or, maybe the paychecks that you get for unemployment, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what has happened since 2020, and this, what I call, everybody was targeted, right? Everybody at home with the computer, everybody working was, targeted for maybe little money. But the shift that has happened between 2020 and the attacks that we've been seeing this early, these early months of 2021, it's pretty much focused on big money. Or if you are a hunter and you like to go out hunt, what is called big game hunting. With the motto that is, if you actually prepare and target these large businesses and corporations, it might guarantee a higher payout. And that has been an example this year, and we'll get to that. But overall, what this ransomware attackers or hackers are using is human operated ransomware with double extortion. So what is double extortion? Well, the first one we already talked about, which is the basis of ransomware, which is the local encryption of the local encryption of your files in the computer, and then the data theft. So now the double extortion is, you want to give me money to get your files back, but taking it to the next level, these hackers are now are also threatening to release files of employees, partners, information publicly, their houses, their address, any type of information that they might have within their data system that they were able to steal before they actually encrypted the systems. Now, ransomware, it's a popular, trendy, and unbelievable easy attack to do. And I know I'm making it sound fun and exciting. It is, but the threat of ransomware for anybody, including ICS, is very real. And I'm going to give you the three main options. The first one is, of course, ransomware as a service. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Ransomware as a service means that I can go into a website, go into a hacking group, and, off the shelf, pick whatever ransomware I feel like and send it out to whoever. So that ransomware company or lucrative business, right? It's making money out of me paying that out of the shelf ransomware that I want to send, let's say, a competitive company, for example. And they're also making profit out of the company that gets affected by that ransomware, because the money is going to go to them, not to you. The other reason that there is a rise on, that ransomware is a threat for any network is the rise of cryptocurrencies. It is easier to make money from ransomware and more difficult to track or to recover the payment because of the technology behind cryptocurrency. It's very hard to track or undo a wire transfer inside of cryptocurrencies, because all financial transactions are pretty much kept very secret. And the last point to make sure to keep in mind that this is a business that it is happening. It is that some countries are providing safe havens to these type of companies, to hackers, to ransomware as a service companies. Why do they provide safe havens? Well, the only thing, for example, China or Russia, multiple governments are okay with having that type of company based out of their country. They will deliberately ignore these hackers as long as they work outside the borders. They do not perform their own job inside borders. They're not doing ransomware in their same government. They can do it. They can base their company out of those countries, but make sure you're not attacking or preliminating that ransomware within your own country. It's funny that when I mention this, because you can actually go into public social media pages like Twitter or Instagram, even YouTube, and you can find these famous Russian hackers that are known to be hackers. And they are pretty much showcasing all their expensive tastes, showcasing their cars and showcasing all their money on their public profiles. Now, if you think about it, all of these reasons that I mentioned has direct and indirect impact on OT networks. Ransomware, to one more point, is adopting ICS specific code to fully stop industrial processes. And one example of that is called ECANs. This ransomware called ECANs. And from 2020 to 2021, you can see that attackers are becoming increasingly hostile with the demand for money, with the demand for the time down, the clock down that they need to achieve. Why can OT be directed or indirectly impacted by ransomware? And we have the specific example that happened this year. We know that Colonial Pipeline it was a ransomware that actually affected the IT side of things. It happened back in May of this year, and it lasted for about, as you can see, 10 days. What they know, or what we know from all the notifications, was that a Colonial Pipeline employee used the same password across multiple services. And the company, and across multiple services, when I say multiple services, was legacy VPN and maybe, like our own personal password. And the password specifically was probably breaching in an attack elsewhere. And that was the direct way in through that employee's legacy VPN. Even if it was a complicated password, it was a breach password somewhere else and a shared password. So going back to the summary of the incident review, DarkSide, again, DarkSide ransomware. DarkSide is a ransomware. It's a private company out of Russia, as I mentioned before, that they do ransomware as a service, or they just perform ransomware for profit. This DarkSide ransomware was found in the IT system. Again, not found on industrial computers running in the pipeline itself. It was found on the employees, on the IT side of things. However, in response, Colonial Pipeline took certain systems down, including the entire pipeline, because they had to fully halt it. They couldn't fully run the pipeline and run all the numbers because they had the financial systems, they had the history of all of that oil running through the pipelines automatically, and in this case, not able to access the IT side of things. So they decided to halt the systems and restart the operations. By after May 7, they stopped. They restarted the operations after May 12. 85% of all full operation of the pipeline by May 13, and then they were fully operational by May 17. If you think about what happened, Colonial Pipeline actually paid the ransomware of these hackers for about $4.4 million in ransomware paid to be able to get their IT systems to be able to make sure the data was not leaked. But keep in mind, our government, the FBI, does not agree, does not support private companies or any company to be paying the ransom for this type of attacks. Okay, so keep that in mind. And if you want more information about the legality of it, there's always the Department of Homeland Security and CISA website, that it is cisa.com/stop ransomware. It will tell you all the legalities. They do not advise, FBI always advises companies to not pay the ransom when you are hit. Now, let's focus on common attack paths that can easily take in place into an industrial control systems. And keep in mind, this image is a recommended best practice for zones and conduits for industrial control systems. But what happens if you do have an appropriate network but have multiple ways of getting in? So despite of the large ransomware, of the large number of ransomware attacks and the ever-evolving continuity that this have, ransomware actually share a lot of strains and many commonalities in the way of initial access, in the way of credential theft, the way they do lateral movement to the network, and the way they do encryption techniques. And according to the data, the most common initial access vectors are phishing, are remote service being compromised, such as remote desktop protocol, if you are using it, or exploiting application vulnerabilities or software vulnerabilities like a single factor VPN or an old or legacy VPN concentrator like they just did for Colonial Pipeline. So again, there's multiple roads into the ICS network, and this is just some that I can, showcase. So you can always go back to, like, all right, what are my attack surfaces, right? Attack surfaces is pretty much the total sum of points inside of your network. And when I say your network, I'm directing only into operational side of things, right? Into an IT. So what are the total sum of points of networks when attacks can occur where an unauthorized access can try to manipulate, extract data, or inject that ransomware inside? Then you have the attack vectors, which we're pretty much just talking about ransomware or the cyber attack specifically. And then at that point, the security breach, any security incident in which sensitive information might have been released, which has been the case for ransomware lately. You want to make sure that information is not jeopardized, so you have to follow or have some type of plan or procedure for data breaches or data theft as well. Now, why does ICS networks need security? ICS, SCADA, OT, however you call your industrial operation network, these applications control real-world processes, like the electricity that we have at home, like the water that we receive at home, and just pretty much to keep the world around us turning and moving. We have proven before that automotive equipment, just automation equipment, is sensitive. It's easily disrupted by basic cyber attacks. And if you think about it, now that we focus on ransomware, we have operating systems sitting on, no matter the industry, there's always Windows, there's always Linux computers interacting or even controlling some of these networks that are very critical for us. Now, let's jump into the defensive recommendations, which is pretty much the meat of this presentation, right? This is where we wanted to get to. The good news for organizations is that it is possible to defend against any type of ransomware by practicing, and you might hear this from other cybersecurity presentations, but by practicing proper security hygiene. And why do we call it hygiene? Because it's like literally brushing your teeth every morning. It's like washing your hands every day. It's proper security hygiene. Everyone, all IT, all OT, your spouse at home, everyone should be everybody working from home should be taking cybersecurity a lot more seriously and practicing these security hygiene examples. The first one, enforce multi-factor authentication wherever possible. So I know this is kind of, where do I start on operational networks and how to apply two-factor authentication. That's why I say whatever possible. Some applications might already have built-in two-factor authentication, including VPNs, okay? If you are using VPNs to remote into industrial control systems, some require two-factor authentication, or they might have built-in two-factor authentication. Make sure you're using those. Or the other way around, if you're an end user and you have vendors or maybe engineering service companies coming in, make sure you're requiring that VPN or requiring that process to have second factor authentication. Now let's move back to your personal use, right? Your IT in your home computers. There are several free and paid tools, applications that you can install like on your phones or on your iPads or pretty much everywhere at your house, on your computer, on your browser extension, to control two-factor authentication as well. So keep that in mind. Just if you Google it, you will be able to easily start this simple security hygiene step. The next one seems, easy to say, but it is harder to apply within industrial control systems networks. So, of course, patches, right? Patch management. If you have, if you're working from home or at the office, you are familiar with IT sending this type of screen saying, hey, we're going to be doing this on your computers. Make sure you save all your work because it will be restarting overnight. There is an important security vulnerability, and this is what we're going to be doing. Well, guess what? This is standard IT security hygiene. And you want to make sure you do this as well on your own, laptops at home. But now let's jump into OT. This is where it becomes a little bit more complicated. Patch management. Patch management is a process you want to do within industrial control systems. I know it's hard. I know it sounds painful because you probably have never updated the PLC that is running one or many of the critical processes within your plant, ever. What does that mean? Why would you need that? Well, if you do an update, a firmware update, it might mean that your computer or the PLC or both might not fully work properly after you do those. And I understand that pretty much will cause downtime, but it is, how do I call it? Scheduled downtime. And that scheduled downtime to do patch management, it's one of those reasons that you can always showcase to your, C-level people and see, listen, this is a security hygiene step we need to do. The same way IT does it every other week, Patch Tuesdays, we need to do it on the operational side of things. If you don't want to give me money, we need to do this basic security hygienes, and I don't want downtime. So maybe we need to, put more money into other defensive mechanisms instead of maybe creating some type of downtime. And we're going to get into that as well. And then the last one is, it's kind of that common sense or security mindset that you want to put yourself into every time you're in a computer now. As I mentioned before, phishing is one of the biggest factors that ransomware get inside networks. So ensure that your employees are trained to just basically detect or have like that little feeling of, hey, there's something wrong here, to detect that phishing attempt, and make sure they're also trained to report to the IT team, to the security personnel, when they observe or when they have that feeling. Even if it's a wrong call, it's better to have that wrong call. Hey, this email doesn't look right, than just ignore that red flag and actually click on that ransomware. Now, these are the main steps that I recommend as security hygiene. Like I mentioned, security hygiene is something that everybody should be doing every day. Now, these are small steps compared to like the big scary ransomware, ransomware as a service that we face. But if you think about it, in a world where most people's home networks or most people's doors are unlocked and just wide open out to the internet, just locking your door might be what deters the attacker's attention to you, okay? So keep that in mind. Basic security hygiene. And now we're gonna kind of move into the same recommended best practices and the basic best practices for ICS security, starting from those basics, right? So talk about or start with the risk management approach. But in this case, most of the time I would talk about all cybersecurity, but in this case, we're just gonna be thinking about ransomware. So if you think about it, go through the process with me. You have asset inventory. What are and how many operating systems do I have within my OT network, right? And then you do your categorization by criticality. So what does this mean is what operating system they're running, what firmware version they're running, maybe it's like a Windows Server versus a Windows Vista or Windows XP that I've still seen live. And then what you do is categorize them by criticality, because the lower, the older the windows, for example, the more vulnerabilities and security risk will pretty much show you. And then you start kind of categorizing what are the more vulnerable PCs or operating system versus the non-vulnerables, and start adding or maybe tailoring controls, determine the potential impact. So if a computer were to be ransomware, what would happen, right? Versus the least critical computer. And then with that, you can start kind of budget and start applying some of the security steps that we're going to be talking about. ID and tailor some of the security controls, implement them, make sure they work, test those security controls, and then if they're working fine, let that process run. And if something changes, well, guess what? Go back to the beginning. Monitor, adjust, and go and do it again. So keep that in mind. I really would like to recommend, because I mean, when I go in and help some of the customers with like basic security controls, my first question is always going to be like, all right, do you have a network drawing of some type, or what do you have? And I would get, like a PDF or maybe like a VCO or a simple Excel spreadsheet will at least get you started to have this first step, which is very important. Asset identification. Create a list of all of your industrial PCs with any type of operating system, what their level of the firmware is, how are they connected, how does the traffic flow looks like, what are they connected directly, and what is the traffic going up and down from IT to OT between computers, so between that IT, between that operating system, and maybe some type of business server in the IT side of the network. So keep that in mind. Now, I'm talking about, like if you don't have anything right now, you can start this way. But there are also other industrial control systems, software vendors that actually have this type of applications already built in. You pay for some type of platform and they will pretty much automatically gather the information. If you put the device closer to your operating system, and then it will gather the information for you. It will rank them by criticality. So there are automated tools by other companies that already exist that can do that for you. Now, the next recommended best practices for industrial control system security around ransomware is, and again, it's not a big surprise because anybody that talks about ICS security talks about defense in depth. So we all have heard about defense in depth, but why do we focus on defense in depth around ransomware? Well, if we go back to our security hygiene, or you know what, let me jump back a little bit. Defense in depth, the basics of defense in depth, also known as castle approach, is pretty much different security strategies. It's an IT concept. It has existed for a long time. And what it does is just add multiple layers of security within your controls or your defensive systems. And just pretty much tells you, hey, just one big security control is never enough. Why do we talk about defense in depth in a ransomware type of situation? Well, because you might not be able to do all the security hygiene steps that I mentioned before. For example, maybe you don't have multi-factor authentication in some of the items that allows lateral movement between operational networks. Or maybe you cannot do patch management on cycling basics. You cannot do it because, again, downtime. It costs money. That's actually a thing that you can prove. So instead of doing patch management, that it would be one defensive layer, instead of doing or you don't have the availability of multi-factor authentication in some of the areas of the network on OT side, you want to make sure you do other defensive mechanisms. For example, antivirus, right? You have the IT network that kind of protects you or your operation from the internet. Let's start from the big picture. IT network, they protect you from the internet, the big scary monsters and the ransomware out there. Then you want to make sure you separate IT and OT, right? Separate IT, have some type of border or isolation or defensive mechanism for the industrial control networks. Now that you're on your OT side of things, what do you want to do there? Control the zones. So think about it as if you have different criticalities and different computers with operating systems. Maybe if you do get a ransomware on zone 1, make sure that ransomware doesn't escape and trickles down or moves laterally everywhere else on the operation side of things. So you could potentially control those zones, that way as well. Physical security, very important. If you have vendors coming in, everybody's, after a year like 2020, everybody's starting to travel a little bit more. They're coming in. Make sure your physical security policies, you have access, you are always with them. They're not plugging in on a laptop, their personal laptops into their system. So things like that. And then most importantly, device security, right? So now we're talking about computers and critical asset, which is probably the PLC. So the device security itself, you want to make sure, protecting a PLC and the process that a PLC is running is different than protecting the files from our operating system, right? So at that level, you want to use something like an antivirus or a SIF scanner that will be able to just monitor the files and make sure there's nothing new or nothing added, or maybe a file that got size modified, something like that, because that is what a virus is. A virus is just files that show up in your computer and start doing things on the background. In this case, ransomware encrypts, sends data leaks through to the ransomware attackers, and then encrypts your information. Now, one more thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is to follow your industry standards, right? Standard compliances and regulations. There is other items that this type of standards or internal policies and procedures can actually help you be a little bit more secure. Talk to your own IT department. They have those policies and procedures, security policies and procedures in place. See what they have, and specifically ask for example, a ransomware incident response plan, right? Like exactly what I'm saying. Ransomware incident response plan. You can kind of ask your IT what they already have in place, but create a specific ICS ransomware incident response plan, because this plan can be tested and using some type of tabletop exercise or cyber exercise. These attacks move quickly, and developing how you and your employees within that plant are going to react, it's like muscle memory. Like they will already know what they need to do, because if they do not act at the moment, it would be the difference of preventing either thousands of dollars or millions of dollars worth of damage. Okay, so keep that in mind. One computer versus a whole network attacked into ransomware. And of course, at the same time, doing these type of exercises and having that incident response, it will help you develop that psychological impact that a breach can have within your employees. So let me focus on two of those standards. The first one is the NERC-CIP. NERC-CIP, and I want to point it out, is very general. It is a regulated by the government standard, where asset owners have to actually follow all of this, what called SIPs, and perform some type of security steps or defensive steps. If you take a look at 008 and 009, it actually showcased incident reporting and response planning and recovery plans. So this is what I want to showcase. Yes, even though that NERC-CIP, a standard like NERC-CIP shows that you have to have something like this, it doesn't really specify for what type of attacks and how to do it. That's why I always recommend talk to your own IT. They might already have something in place and just adapt it to ICS. So keep that in mind. It does say, hey, you need to have an incident reporting and incident response plan, but it doesn't say how to really do it or write it down. One more, and probably one of my personal favorites right now for industrial control systems standards, it's the ISA 99, or also known as IEC 62443. This general image is just an overview of what it is, but just to give you everything, it's a new international series of standards. It focuses on IT security, but in an industrial communications networks. So a lot of, for example, manufacturing, a lot of manufacturing facilities, automotive, are following this specific IEC 62443. But I've talked to a lot of industries that are actually still following this ones, including utilities. Like they have some type of mixture between the NERC-CIP and the IEC 62443. And why is it one of my personal current favorite? Because it shares a load of security responsibility between the end user, between any engineering service providers that could be attempting or helping this end user, and the product manufacturer. So if you take a look again, for example, right here where it says, let me, if I can, there you go. Oh, I click one. I just wanted to highlight one real quick. Right there. You guys can see my laser pointer, the ISA 62443-2-4, security programs requirements for service providers. So again, service providers, these are engineering service companies that might be coming into your OT network. They have to follow requirements to be compliant with ISA 62443. And then another thing is like patch management in your environment, right? We talked about patch management, and they will give you a series of steps of recommendations to do patch management, or if you're not going to be able to do patch management, maybe you want to do these other steps. Again, this is a step that most of the time the end user, you own that network, you schedule your patch management. And then another one, for example, right here at the bottom, is at the component level. These are where mostly vendors like us, like Phoenix Contact, kind of follow. And we have, the 62443-4-1, which is a secure product development lifecycle. So we have to develop products securely, which following some security requirements. And not just that, those products have to have security functions, built in to make sure they're, properly configured by the end user when they come to install it on their networks. Now, one more thing, and this is kind of like a pretty big one, is who has cybersecurity governance? Who owns that network? Is it IT, right? Is it OT? Who owns the operating systems in the OT side of things? Is it the engineer, or is it the IT security team? And the next question that I want to ask you, or to start thinking about it, is who is going to respond to that cyber incident? Think about it. Now, Colonial Pipeline incident showed that IT ransomware trickled down, even though that the ransomware didn't affect industrial control systems, the effects of it trickled down to the full shutdown of the entire operation, of the entire pipeline network. So the ideal answer to those questions that I just asked, it's a collaboration between IT and OT. What I always say is IT, or or IT should have a department that is only OT focused, or maybe OT should have a department inside OT that is IT focused, right? Like the IT personnel within the OT networks. And of course, it talks about all of this. It talks about identify threats at the OT side, correct, identify the risk, and maintain that asset inventory just for OT side of things. Make sure you have some type of security government, security monitoring and governance. They already have, some IT already have some type of monitoring on the networks, but how do you take advantage and apply it into industrial control systems? And of course, logs are critical to be able to know what happened and when did it happen. And then have or collaborate with IT is important because you can use SIEMs, right? SIEM is Security Information and Event Management. If you talk to your IT security team, they probably have some type of SIEM where this software or this platform collects logs and correlates the information to alert on activities like real-time analysis. Call it like a secured SCADA room, right? So you have a SCADA room only for secure operations, like a secure operational center, where you have an intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, security audit, logging, security incident and event monitoring, and you're taking advantage of some of these IT tools or IT knowledge and IT resources, but now apply for your operational networks, specifically to monitor ransomware. Now, we're getting to the end of the slides. The future predictions. So ransomware is just going to continue to grow. I mean, I think everybody knows this. I think this is like the easy prediction for everybody. It's just going to continue to grow. It will continue to be a major threat. And it will continue because it will continue to incorporate both data theft and extortion techniques. Because it's proven to be successful in Colonial Pipeline, paying 4.4 million, showcase that it is successful. The other thing that could potentially happen, it's state-sponsored activities, state-sponsored ransomwares that could potentially happen within the government side of things. And there is high confidence amongst various like ICS cybersecurity companies that the threat of ransomware will be capable, if it's not already, of disrupting industrial processes. So as soon as you get that operating system or files locked in your computer, it won't only do that. Imagine if that computer, that industrial PC, has the files, that ransomware will be smart enough to talk to the PLC that is directly connected and halt the entire process, just shut it down, so that you have nothing to work with. So that is the level of what we think the future predictions of ransomware are going to come out. So it's going to get worse before it gets better. I mean, if your data is locked or data is leaked, isn't scary enough? Like for ICS networks, let's take it a little bit more personal. Like your thermostat has been proven to be hacked or attacked to ransomware, and the hackers will actually cramp up the heat all the way to the highest level until you as a user pay it. So make sure you follow those security hygienes. Cars, smart cars, and the smarter they are, the more computers they have. So keep this in mind. Cars have been hacked. There's a ton of videos. There's a ton of ways to actually showcase this. Thermostat, refrigerators, ovens, your car, even insulin pumps have been able to get hacked. So now it's not just affecting a process or downtime, it's actually affecting life itself. So, and going back to industrial control systems, there is a connection between physical and cyber. So at your house, at your car, your insulin pump, yes, it's definitely affecting you as a user. But imagine this physical connection, which it has happened before with an example like Triton malware. It specifically happened for safety. It's a physical cyber incident that happened that could, pretty much cause losses of life if successfully attacked. Now, closing, of course, ransomware attacks. So a couple of the facts. Ransomware attacks on industrial entities increased more than 500% from 2018 all the way to 2021. Manufacturing entities comprise 1/3 of the confirmed ransomware attacks on industrial control systems, and utilities make up the close second, about 10%. Newer ransomware strains have the ability to stop industrial processes because they can talk and they understand those industrial protocols. And of course, keep that in mind that ransomware operators or attackers have been using both data theft and extortion into the operation to get what they want, to get the reward. So with all that said, this is where I kind of end the important portion of the presentation. And I want to also focus on the Phoenix contact can always help. No matter your goal, if you are protecting against ransomware, if you are protecting against any type of vulnerability or any type of attack vector that could potentially happen with within your network, Phoenix Contact can help you get there. We have secure products, or what we call the 360 security degree secure products, which pretty much we develop and operate security processes to develop these products. And we also have security functions built into this. One more thing that we always like to showcase is our Product Security Incident Response Team website. If we happen to have a vulnerability, we will let you know. We will put them all and how to fix them right there on our landing page that you can see on the screen. Additional to that, we also provide secure services through what we call network engineering services. We can do a lot of the steps that you might not be aware or you might not feel comfortable with doing, like access your network, how many operating systems you have, what are their firmware levels. Maybe if you need a network redesign or design, we can configure, we can document, we can train and support your people inside of the network. And the secure solutions is combining the Phoenix Contact secure products and services with the industry knowledge that we already have within the different industry. We provide a wide range of secure solutions, no matter the industry you're at. And that is the end of my presentation, of course. I am going to take a minute and see if there is any questions into the Q&A. And it seems that there is only one question, so you can submit more while I answer that one. The question says, what are those ICS software companies that would do vulnerability management or asset identification and management automatically? And some of the companies are pretty well known. One of them, Dragos, Forescout, Splunk. It's actually an IT software. Dragos is more an OT software platform that can actually do that for you. And there's a lot of videos and demos online that could show that. So that is the question of the day. Keep in mind, the more you pay, the more encouraged and well-founded these ransomware attackers will be. I hope you enjoy the information today. I would encourage you to follow me on LinkedIn for any industrial control systems security tips and tricks and trends and information. I normally do post there regularly. Feel free to connect with me and we can chat soon. Thank you very much for your time, for attending, and feel free to follow up with me. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.